Well, what's the cost of that? There are estimates which say that the Indian economy is taking a daily hit of 30 to 40,000 crore rupees because of the lockdown. A 34-day lockdown could result in a GDP loss of over 10 lakh crore rupees. Meanwhile, let's look at the human cost. Jobs disappearing, migrant workers not knowing what their situation is, and in some cases what their next meal will come from. You have business owners who have seen their entire work just disappearing and evaporating. You have industry that doesn't know what to do next. And here you also have huge opportunities of foreign investment which seem to really go away. What can we do? What can we do to ensure that post the 3rd of May, we have a stronger, clearer action plan? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Niranjan Hiranandani, who's of course also president of ASSOCHAM, Mayank Parley joining us on the show today, our very own consulting editor, Maithili Bhusman. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Let me go across first to Mayank. Mr. Shah, I'm coming to you first because, you know, you are in a business where you need to manufacture. And it is also a food supply. What has been the experience so far, and what do you say to the question of reviving India right now as being the topmost priority?
Well, so I'll put it this way, that, you know, there has been an impact, to be very honest, of the lockdown. It's not that, you know, food, despite of being essential and despite of being exempted, is affected because of the policies. So one of them being, you know, not using more than 50% of the labor on your plant, and which is fine. I mean, we understand that. I mean, that is the need of the time. So there has been impact, but I would say that, you know, thankfully, very fortunately, we are not as impacted as some other industries and some other sectors. So, for example, if you ask me, you know, food and staples are the ones who have relatively been less impacted compared to, let's say, you know, some other sectors which are, let's say, either luxury goods or white goods or, you know, aviation, tourism and those kind of, which are very severely affected, aviation and tourism and those kind of. So that way, you know, we are better off. Having said that, I think, you know, we as a country have taken a stance in terms of, you know, putting lives over economy. And, you know, to my mind, I believe that while that was right, I think, you know, we need to stick to it. I mean, I'm seeing, you know, a lot of sections, a lot of quarters now talking about, you know, opening up and that we need to, you know, open up immediately. There has been an impact on economy. I completely agree with that. I'm not saying no to that. But, you know, it shouldn't happen that in that rush to open up, we try and undo whatever we have done. You know, we have fairly well managed the situation till date, and let's not try to undo it. I mean, then we would neither reap the benefit of what we have done or we have, you know, achieved till date, nor we will try and, you know, I mean, see, anyways, we have lost 1 month of the year, this financial year, okay? Most industries have lost it, and it would be difficult going forward, you know, to make up for this 1 month in the balance 11 months. So having said that, now that's something done. Let's at least try and encash or, you know, try and build on what good work that we have done in this first month in terms of, you know, assuring or ensuring that, you know, we have not really allowed the situation to go out of control.
Mr. Shah, let me tell you and our viewers over here as a complete caveat, not for a moment are we saying open up a restaurant in the middle of a hotspot like Mumbai.
Yeah.
We're not saying that. Or let's pack the next cinema hall with you know, with the latest release in the middle of Thane or Delhi. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that where is the plan to start where we can't? We know that there are about 350 odd districts which are green zones in the country. Let me bring in Niranjan Hiranandani here on this point. There are green zones in the country. The problem right now is everything is interconnected. So it's going to be very difficult for anyone to start business, start production lines if any of their supplies come through other zones, red or orange. Isn't that the main issue, Mr. Hiranandani?
Tamanna, you're absolutely right. And the first and foremost, we have to congratulate the Prime Minister and the country for leading the position on the lockdown in a very strong way in order to save lives. Having said this, I think Jan se abhi jahan. And I think unless we don't look at livelihood in a very strong and quick way, we are going to jump from frying pan to a fire. Because if the economics is not taken care of, I think the 1.9% growth is a fallacy. I'm looking at a -2 to 3% growth if this is not opened out quickly. So I think it's extremely important to do. Number two, there is so much unemployment which is going to take place or is already taken place that it's really going to be extremely difficult to get these people back into the jobs. So I think the earlier that we are able to kickstart, taking hot zones and difficult areas into consideration, of course we need to do it. But I think the decision making to start the work in many areas, especially at the local level, is absolutely hesitant. I find that even though the government in the center may give the permission, at the local level, decision making is too slow to start back the work. And the kind of conditions and things which are being put, which are sometimes unreasonable, which are reasonable conditions, we think we should put it, and I'm fully for it. But I'm finding that people are finding it difficult to start the wheels of work and economy back into track. So we do strongly recommend that this should happen. Yes, the first directions have received from the Home Ministry in order to partially open that. And I'm hopeful that by the second, we should be able to start a lot of the sectors in the economy while keeping Mayank's thought in mind that we need to take due care in order to see that the spread doesn't take place, especially in the hot area.
What has been the experience so far, Mr. Hiranandani? You and I spoke a little after 20th of April when real estate, for example, was allowed to function if workers were on site and in green zones and rural areas, etc. What has been the experience? Have you been able to ramp up work considerably?
No, in fact, all the permissions which were being processed were stopped, and really none of the works have started at all. In fact, only now they are going to allow such things to happen, and that too in a limited sort of way, at least in most of the areas that we know. So we do see still construction, which actually occupies 15% of the workforce of India today in both in real estate and in regular construction, out of jobs. If we can get these people back onto the workforce, I think it would be extremely important. It's the second largest employer in India after agriculture. And I do believe otherwise there's going to be a huge amount of disruption which we will not be able to cater for. So yes, they have started.
I have one follow-up question, and this is a question that it's not really valid for Mr. Shah, but it is for Mr. Hiranandani. Because parle biscuits people will eat. Lockdown or no lockdown. Who's going to buy houses and flats? Or commercial real estate if people are going to start working from home?
Believe you me, working from home, people want bigger flats. So previously when two people were working in the house, now both the husband and wife remaining in the house, they are unable to work from one room. So actually the demand for residential housing has actually grown due to the lockdown period. It's the reverse from what you are thinking. So while commercial real estate space may now become diluted by virtue of the fact that you don't need to go to your office like you are doing something from your house today, you will not need an office. You can do the work from your own residence. So similarly, you need bigger residential premises or at least one, if not two extra rooms where you can work from your residence. So I'm not so worried about the demand for housing in the long run. Yes, what I'm worried about is we need a demand push stimulus, which has not happened. We have been asking through ASSOCHAM that at least there should be a 50% cut in GST for the next 3 months in order to kickstart this demand, not only for houses, automobiles, mobiles, going for hotels and tourism. I think 3 months, if it is given a short period, it will give a kickstart to the entire economy. And I think that would be imperative to be a part of the stimulus package.
Okay.
which we hope will be announced soon.
Let me get Maithili in. Mr. Hiranandani is optimistic, Maithili, that people will want bigger houses. My question is, how will they pay for them? We've already seen the job losses, the pay cuts, depressed incomes, which will lead to depressed demand.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure I share Mr. Hiranandani's optimism. In fact, I'm more likely to be eating Parle biscuits, because Parle biscuits are something that most people in the country can still perhaps afford. Even if you lose a job, you could still afford a packet of Parle biscuits. But larger housing, most certainly not for a long, long time. But it is a very difficult call, Tamanna, for any person in authority, for the Prime Minister, for anybody in authority. It is a very tough call, because we're living in a world of unknown unknowns. So the fact is that even though you know you need to open up, how do you go about opening up? Because the fact is that many of the hotspots are in areas which are very close to industrial areas. So whether looking at Thane, Pune, Mumbai, Indore, these are the areas where you have a lot of industrial activity as well. So you have to be very careful that how do you manage to open up and allow industry, which industries you allow. And I think most important is that government should have clarity in its guidelines, should not have this kind of flip-flop that we've seen, because that really disconcerts everybody. And we must also remember that a lot of the migrant labor now, when you open up, will want to go back to their villages. So you will have a problem both of labor as well as capital. Because yes, as Mr. Hiranandani said, there is a lot of liquidity, but banks are not willing to lend because they're so risk averse. So you will have neither liquidity, you will not have capital, nor will you have labor, because all the migrant labor will go back at least for a few days. So it is a very, very tough call. I think we'll have to feel our way and cross the stream by stepping on the stones, by feeling for the stones.
No, so we're at the stream, Maithili. The reason that we're asking this question is because we're at the stream. We have to start looking for the stones. We're in a situation where the worst hit 15 districts in the country are also perhaps some of the largest consuming ones, because they're in urban areas. They're in in and around your metros. But the rest may be pretty okay. How do we find a way where the safer zones, the green zones, maybe the less populated zones, start, producing and manufacturing to feed demand, which we need to tap, of people sitting stuck inside in your red zones?
Is that addressed to me, Samana?
Yes, Maithili.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult, as I said, because our supply chains are so interlinked. So even if you allow activity in the areas that are green today, you have to think in terms of public transport. How are you going to get the workers to the place? How are you going to get the supply chains working? Because a lot of the inputs might be coming from some other areas. So which is why I think government will have to take one step forward, maybe two steps forward, one step backwards. It's going to be exceedingly difficult. It'll have to be trial and error, which is why I think one will have to accept that economic growth this year is going to be perhaps, as Mr. Hiranandani said, possibly even negative. But that is something that the entire world is living with. We cannot be different. So I think it'll have to be trial and error, and very cautiously. You cannot really open up in a big bang way. And I think one will have to live with the fact that yes, this disease is going to stay. Yes, ultimately we will aspire for herd immunity. But until we achieve that herd immunity level, what can we do to minimize loss of life while also minimizing the loss of economic welfare and economic growth? Tough call. We'll have to go purely by trial and error. Open up those areas. There, Mr. Hiranandani is lucky because construction is one area where you possibly can recommence, simply because there will not be that much of crowd on the roads and construction sites. But there again, you have a tough call, because most of the labor that comes is migrant labor. It's very difficult to enforce social distancing. Will they wear masks? And government has also be very clear what is the responsibility of the employer, the promotee, and the promoter. So these are the issues which government must be very clear and not, as I said, do flip-flop. At the same time, the fiscal stimulus that we've all been waiting for, that must come. Unless that comes, I'm afraid today they won't buy houses, and if it continues, maybe not even Parle-G biscuits tomorrow.
Yes, Maya.
I would just like to add to it.
Parle-G biscuits has said no. We have to find a yes, Maya. Please come in.
No. So I would rather like to further that point. I think the immediate problem ahead of the industry, or the immediate challenge that is ahead of the industry, and that was partially touched up by both Mr. Hiranandani as well as Maithili. A big problem is of the migrant labor. They moved back. Now in a scenario where we open up and we facilitate that they should come back, there is going to be, some resistance. It's not that, you open up and they would at the first instance come back and start working. That's not going to happen, one. Secondly, there is also a fear. Those who are still in the cities and who have not been able to migrate back, probably at the first given instance, they would like to go back. So I think the immediate challenge ahead of the industry is, if you want to start, do you have people to start? Okay. So while, you know, we have been fortunate being in food, and government that way, I mean, considering, you know, food being essential, have given us that, exemption where we can continue production, and we can do that with, you know, 50% of our labor. While they have provided, you know, that facility to us, we can't even amass 50% of the labor. So I think, you know, the problem is we don't have enough.
What levels up to now, Mr. Shah? The last we spoke, you were at 25 to 30% capacity.
Yeah. So we are up today to 50-55% of the capacity, but the thing is that demand has gone up. So, you know, if I talk about biscuits, and I'm sure, you know, all of you resonated to the thought of having biscuits, and you said that, you know, the consumption has gone. In fact, when you are staying at home, the consumption typically goes up. Okay.
Yes.
Add to it a little bit of hoarding mentality also. If you go out, normally don't get biscuits. If you see biscuits on the shelves, you'll try and buy a little more. So what is happening as a result of that? We are seeing a jump in demand. So while there is a jump in demand, let's say if I'm, you know, selling 100 units, today there is a demand of almost about 150 to 170. But the supply is only about 50-55. So, you know, there is huge demand supply gap. And while we would love to, you know, fulfill or service that demand supply gap, the issue with us is there's no labor available. And, you know.
No, so I want to bring in another angle over here. The fact is that post 3rd May, in the foreseeable future, life has changed for all of us for some time now, maybe in some ways permanently. Everyone has to come to terms with that in different aspects. Doesn't industry have to as well? You know, obviously things like having the CEO being criminally, you know, culpable if someone gets COVID-19 is absurd, and the government walked that back. But things like 50% of the staff working, maybe graded shifts, enforcing social distancing, giving enough impetus to your labor so that they come back and they work with you because they know you will take care of them. Yeah. We are going to have to work with these new realities on industry end as well. Yeah, let Mayank come in, and then Mr. Hirandani, yes?
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, that's a very good point that, you know, why industries are doing their level best. So, you know, we are going all out to ensure that the labor who works with us directly, indirectly, as well as the people on the field who are exposed to the risk of contracting the virus are insured. They are insured, and we have done that. We are taking care of all those things. But I think, you know, there is a little bit of initiative required from government side also to ensure some kind of assurance to them that, you know, if they are coming back, I think, you know, they should not really worry about their lives, and there should be enough, you know, that should be done for them. Basically motivating them to come back from their, you know, native places to their, you know, to the cities where they were working, to their working places, and kickstart, you know, the manufacturing. That's what is required right now. Because, and as you rightly said, I mean, you know, there would have to be all sorts of, you know, things which would have to be worked out, right from graded shifts to multiple shifts to ensuring that, you know, there is social distancing. A good amount of those things are already being done right now. You know, I mean, you start doing all those things, you know, when you have this kind of a problem. So those are, some of those things have already started happening. But I think, you know, a nudge from government in terms of, you know, some kind of assurance to these people to come back and that, you know, there wouldn't be any issue is something that, you know, all of us are waiting. I'm sure, you know, even Mr. Hirandani would agree to that. That assurance to the migrant labor that, you know, you can come back. It's not that, you know, if you come back, there would be some problem, or, you know, even if you have some problem.
No, the assurance that people would want is that they have stable incomes. What did a lot of people find suddenly? That they were thrown out of their houses overnight because they didn't have rent to pay, they didn't have food to eat, and there was a panic. People just wanted to go back. Mr. Hirandani, you know, we've been speaking about large companies over here, which are trying to figure out ways and means. There are many smaller companies who maybe are just throwing their hands up and saying that, you know, I'm just going to sit this one out till things become clearer. What happens to their employees?
So there I go by what Maithil said. We don't want a flip-flop method of starting and stopping. I'm very clear. I think we have to give a roadmap. We have had enough time to think through all these issues, whether it is stimulus, whether it is how we are going to handle the dangerous zones, how we should come back and get people to work, what should be the action taken at the local level if it increases, if it is reduced. I think Maithil is on the dot. We must be very clear. You have had enough time to think through all these issues. Number two, again, if you don't bring the stimulus package, the demand for biscuits will continue, but for nothing else will remain. Because it's not about cars, it's not about mobiles, it's not about any other thing. You're not going to have the buying capacity. Number three, the government itself is the biggest defaulter. It is not paid income tax refunds, GST refunds. Their PSUs have not paid amounts. National Highway Authority of India has not paid. Discount payments are not made. Fertilizer subsidies are not paid. State government payments of GST have not been paid. So much so that my state government, Maharashtra, which was a good paymaster, is paying salaries by installments to their officers and staff. What does it mean? It means this money has to start rolling. If you don't start the economy rolling, even the government itself is defaulting in making its own payment, and it expects that all the other people in business must pay salaries, but the government itself is not doing the payment. How can this subsist? Let them at least start the ball rolling by themselves making these payments. And this amount is not small. It is more than 2,20,000 crores of rupees, which must come back into the economy. So along with the default of banks not lending, whether it is due to any credit guarantee, and I'll look at Maithil to guide us on that issue, we need something on that kind of things to be done. And I think if these things are done correctly, see the strong action which the Prime Minister took for locking down has been very effective, and I'm very impressed with it. But the economic opening is not as effective. So the government must admit that you need to do the second part of it as effectively as they have done the first part, which is lockdown for the purposes of spreading of this disease, the opening up with all the stimulus package, opening up of the whole thing must be done with the same fervor as Maithil has just told, no flip-flops in the methodology of doing it. I'm very clear in that. And if they take a strong decision the same way that they have done for the lockdown, I promise you, 6 months from today, people will buy the houses in spite of what Maithil is telling today.
Okay, so the question is, can you take a one-size-fits-all approach right now? Maithili, it's different states, within the states, it's different districts. You're going to have to play this by ear. We've seen other countries where they've opened up, then realized numbers have jumped, they've locked down again. So we need that flexibility of thought and that, swiftness of action.
Oh, well, absolutely. I think it is very important to give this kind of flexibility to state governments, and within the state government to give that further flexibility at the local self-government level. And this is why we'll prove the difference in terms of success or not success. Because the local self-government, the panchayats will know exactly, they'll know their area much better. They will know how to handle the issues that arise. And I couldn't agree with Mr. Hiranandani more. The government showed a great deal of courage in announcing the lockdown when things were not so depressing. It was really not very sure whether that was the right step or not. But the Prime Minister took the courage. But subsequently, it is as if the courage has failed the government. On the economic package, they're really floundering. And this is where I think we've already lost precious time. The government must make up for it. Because the fiscal stimulus, not only will it help the employers, you tell the employers to pay their employees and not to kind of retrench them. But if there's no revenue, how will they pay? So this is why government must come forward with some kind of a wage subsidy, some kind of a credit guarantee to enable the banks to lend, to know that if an account becomes non-performing, you will not have the CVC, the CBI, the ED come down on the necks of bankers. So I think government surprisingly seems to have lost this courage when it comes to the economic package. And mind you, Tamanna, it's not as if there isn't money for the government, because before, at the time of the global financial crisis, the fiscal deficit jumped from 3% to little over 6%. So even if there was a doubling of the fiscal deficit, I don't think the heavens are going to fall. So I frankly find it very difficult to understand why the government is going so slow. I think they need to move fast and then give that kind of flexibility to states.
Is it the Fitch fear? In a sense, Fitch Ratings today saying, that India's ratings will be affected and impacted if the fiscal outlook turns negative? Is it a fear of rating agencies or how the world will view us? When very soon we are going to have a situation where worldwide capital will start looking for a home.
No, well, absolutely, because it's not just India whose ratings will come down. All over the world, there's not a single country which will be able to retain the rating that they had pre-COVID. So I don't think we should get scared of rating agencies, because money will come because we have the markets. Where will people sell their ACs, their cars, their fridges, etc.? Not in the Western world, where the markets are already saturated and the economy is going to take a much bigger hit perhaps. So ultimately, I don't think we should be scared of rating agencies. Ratings, in fact, have not really held back foreign investment. People will come if the underlying ease of doing business is good, if there is demand. And this is where government must step forward and spend. I think this is what we're waiting for. I hope before the lockdown is lifted, because it must be lifted in a graded fashion from Monday, the government will come forth and make up for its past losses.
Oh, let's see what happens next week. Before we round up, Mayank, what do you hope happening before next week in terms of clarity? In terms of clarity for you as someone who runs a business, what would you like to hear very clearly on what steps will be taken next?
Yeah. So, as an industry, we will expect government to, assure us on how they are looking at, opening up. In terms of if they are talking about, opening it up in a graded fashion, what are the policies? So initially we had a little bit of trouble when the lockdown was imposed because there was, so while there is a decision that's taken at the center, if you talk about the execution is done by the state governments and the local government and local bodies, I think it's not flowing down. While a decision was taken that there would be a lockdown, there was no clarity down the line on what are the sectors which would be exempted. So there has to be a clear way forward on how they are looking at lifting up. Secondly, as I said, things are so coupled here, as in if you're talking about migrant laborers, they might have gone back. How do you want to bring them back? What are the policies that government would have to ensure that there is no fear among those migrant laborers to come back to their workplaces? That's another thing that we would like government to probably let us know. And thirdly, and probably more importantly, I mean, what is it that government is looking at doing in terms of, some kind of stimulus so that, there is, demand that's, or there is, demand generation that happens. So priming of economy, as we say. So those are certain things that we would be looking forward before the lockdown is lifted.
Mr. Hiranandani, you could quickly wrap up. We've had a great discussion here, but what are the specific things that you would like to see coming out with full clarity before the 3rd of May and, before we know what the next couple of weeks are looking like?
Number one, stages of opening up in each of the segments, except the very hot spots within the cities, which we are talking about. Number two, stimulus package to be clarity and done very, very quickly. Third, Reserve Bank of India spending and seeing to it that the necessary positions are made clear that the lending should take place with credit guarantees by the central government for the increased amount of lending that is required at this point of time. And the fourth part of it is to see a roadmap as to how you are going to do demand creation. I think we need to reduce GST by 50% for the next 3 to 6 months with deficit financing in order to kickstart the economy. You have to have a demand push, which is needed today. You can't let the economy slowly build up and create demand. You need to create it, and across the board, not for real estate or any other sector, automobiles or biscuits, but for everything across the board.
Absolutely. We'll wait and hope that India's revival mission, our campaign that we're pushing for, gets more and more voices to join in. We also ask all of our viewers to come in with your views, with your points on this, on how we can move ahead. Because remember, there is life after COVID. We have to look at this in a optimistic manner and plan for the future where we come out even stronger. With that, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the show this evening.
Thank you.
When it comes to the market, risk is the name of the game. As the market moves through its phases, ET Now decodes, analyzes, evaluates, and offers sharp insights that propels you ahead of the pack, guiding you through market risks all through the week. On the market, only on ET Now.
Partnered by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
I love my credit card bill. Let me explain. Every time I pay my bill using Cred, I receive Cred coins, which I can then redeem for all kinds of exclusive rewards, which means I'm rewarded not just for using my credit card, but also for paying the bill. Ooh, I like these.
Honey, I brought the market home.
Stock, commodity, mutual fund, all on tap to track or trade in the small little app. I buy, sell, and trade with one click, faster than you can even blink. Rays of live news, views, prices on my phone. Days of paper, PC, and TV are bygone.
Honey, can you bring the supermarket home too?
Download the IIFL Markets app now.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risk. Please read all the documents carefully before investing.
In the near future, virtual reality will transport you live to the news or even a factory. Business plans will be shared via augmented reality. Legal cases will be fought in cyber courts. And you will be able to download your mind into a machine. Even a 100-year-old university may not prepare you for this future. Bennett University does.
Introducing ET Prime by the Economic Times. A premium experience with exclusive stories for leaders of tomorrow.
Now the very question is coming from certain helplessness, what shall I do? Don't do anything. Just sit back and just concern yourself with something which is a life process. Maybe your heartbeat, maybe your breath, maybe just a sensation of being alive. Something which indicates life to you. Just pay attention to that for some time. Slowly you will see there is a distinction between what is you and what you have gathered, which includes both your physiological and psychological possibility or mess, whatever you made out of it.
लाइफ में इससे आगे बढ़ना है तो जीरो से शुरू करो। एंजल ब्रोकिंग का नया आई ट्रेड प्राइम प्लान चुनो। डिलीवरी ट्रेड पर ऑर्डर ब्रोकरेज चार्ज है 0 फॉर लाइफ टाइम। फिर चाहे ट्रेड छोटा हो या बड़ा, रफ्तार बढ़ाओ। आई ट्रेड प्राइम पर आओ।
एंजल ब्रोकिंग, आगे बढ़ने का स्मार्ट सौदा। Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
What is Cred, you ask? Cred is a unique platform on which I manage all of my credit cards. It reminds you to pay your credit card bill so you never miss your due date. And paying your credit card bill is super easy. Any card, any bank, all from one place. That's it.
The world has been forced into a standstill. Every day, the battle becoming more uphill. Now, more than ever, it's easy to believe all the naysayers who say the Indian economy will struggle to recover. All the doomsdayers who think it's time to look for an exit strategy and cover. Well, no one believed India could win the 1983 World Cup. But we did. No one believed a man from rural India could develop an affordable sanitary product. But he did. No one believed India could send a satellite to Mars. But we did. Every single time we were backed into a corner, we came out swinging against all odds. Despite every obstacle, it's time again for a rematch. You ready for it?
Hello and a very warm welcome to ET Now. I'm Vikram Oza. Here's where you get a roundup of the top stories of the day. And we begin first talking about the status on COVID and the numbers as they are stacking up. It's day 35, as we know, of the lockdown. And earlier at the health briefing, this is what we got to hear, that we are inching up towards the 30,000 mark when it comes to detection of cases. The total number of cases now stands at 29,974. And that includes 937 deaths. 62 deaths have taken place over the last 24 hours, which means that this is the sharpest single-day increase in death cases in the country. The country's recovery rate now stands at 23.33%. With 8,590 cases and 369 deaths, Maharashtra is the worst-hit state currently. Also, 80 districts across the country have reported no COVID-19 cases over the span of the last 7 days. Also, the Health Ministry today has informed that plasma therapy is still in its experimental stage. It's not been proved that this is something that works against COVID-19. In fact, here's an excerpt of what we heard from the Health Ministry briefing earlier today.
I would like to mention about the plasma therapy for COVID-19, which has been talked about of late. इस पर काफी चर्चा हो रही है. In this regard, let me clarify that ICMR has already stated very clearly that currently there are no approved therapies for COVID-19, including plasma therapy. मैं फिर से आप लोगों की दृष्टि में लाना चाहूंगा कि COVID-19 के लिए आज देश में क्या दुनिया भर में भी कोई approved therapy नहीं है. And plasma therapy is one of the therapy which is being experimented with. However, so far there is no evidence to support it as a treatment. यह अभी भी experimental stage पर है. इसका कोई एविडेंस नहीं है कि इसको ट्रीटमेंट के रूप में इस्तेमाल किया जा सकता है. हमारे देश की जनसंख्या इतनी ज्यादा है कि हम कई देशों के समान हमारे देशों की जनसंख्या है.
Now, even as India is tackling the health crisis, there is an economic impact that is going to play out, especially on small businesses and startups. The impact could run very deep, as a survey suggests. How deep is the question, and what can we do to mitigate the kind of risks that stand in its wake is something that we are addressing through our Times Network's latest mission, which is called the India Revival Mission. Here's a report.
"40 days and counting. That is how long India will be in lockdown. A lockdown that has possibly saved thousands of lives. But the lockdown is now beginning to have serious impact.